First of all, let me turn and welcome you. It is day 5,599 that Boswell's been here and been in business, and we're here glad to spend it first with our conversation partner, Brynn Teaman, runs the popular bookstagrammer account, Read Your Worries Away, and is co-host, of course, of Fillers by the Book Club, and she is here to conversationalize tonight with our guest, David Ellis. David Ellis is an Edgar Award-winning author. He's written 11 David Ellis novels. He's also co-authored 9 books with James Patterson, and for the past 10 years, he's also served as a justice of the Illinois Appellate Court for the First District, in case you were keeping tabs. And he was the youngest fellow elected to the post, so pretty impressive. And he's here tonight with his new novel, The Best Lies. Now, The Best Lies, it has been called in various review outlets and blurbs. It has been called fast-paced, high-stakes, unpredictable, complicated, surprising, satisfying, addictive, whip-smart, truly perfect, twisty, gripping, and slippery. I particularly like the Seattle Times called it Law and Order with a cynical twist, which is right up my alley, and I think it'll be up yours too. So please give them both a warm welcome.
Well, I'm super excited to be here with David today to talk about The Best Lies. I read your previous book, Look Closer, back at the beginning of last year.
Right. Yeah.
And you actually came to our book club. We have a few of our book club members here tonight.
Yes.
But that book, reading it in the beginning of last year, I still to this day compare it to all the thrillers that I read. It's so good. And if you've not read it, you should definitely read it. And now after reading The Best Lies, I know I'm going to be doing the same thing with this one too.
Oh, well, thanks.
It's really that good. So has anyone gotten the chance to read The Best Lies yet? Would you agree that it's really good? For anyone that has not read it yet, can you tell us what it's about?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to me. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I never get tired of it. I never lose my appreciation for you guys taking time out of your day and come listen to us talk and buying my book and talking to me online in feedback. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, The Best Lies is, after I wrote Look Closer, which was an interesting book, and it's done quite well, and it was I think it had a unique place in the thriller world, and it was a little bit of pressure, like, what do I do after that? Because I felt like Look Closer was probably, I mean, I hope if you read it, I hope you liked it, but whether you liked it or not, for me, I thought that was me at my best. That was my home run, and I thought, okay, now I've hit a home run. What do I do next? And as usual, I turned to my wife, who is smarter than me and knows me really well. And she said, you're at your best when you start with the character, a character you really want to spend time with, and then build a plot around that. So the main character of The Best Lies is Leo Balanoff. He's a Chicago attorney, but more to the point, he's a diagnosed pathological liar. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you write thrillers, if you write books about deception, to begin a novel with a character who's a pathological liar in the first person, talking to you at all times. In addition to that, the other main trait that Leo has, besides being a pathological liar, is he has an oversized sense of justice. When things are not, he's an attorney, and when he sees a wrong in the law, he will stop at just about nothing to correct it, at often great personal cost to himself. So that's how the book begins. This pathological liar is arrested by the Chicago police, well, almost the Chicago police, a suburban police force, for murder. And his fingerprints are on the weapon. And so then he very quickly, being in that kind of jeopardy, finds himself forced into the middle of an undercover FBI operation. So I thought, if you have a diagnosed pathological liar in the middle of an undercover FBI operation, what could go wrong, right? So I thought that's a good way to start, right? Like, that's a good idea for a plot. But even before I got to the plot, Brynn, I was just saying, start with the character. So pathological liar, that's the very first thing that came into my mind. Wouldn't that be cool? Someone who just cannot be trusted. But then you dig, right? And you build a character out. Before I've written any plot, what do I know about this guy? What's his background? Why is he a pathological liar? Did something happen to him in the past that made him that way? And of course, the answer is going to be yes, right? And so I built up his past. And in doing that, this always seems to happen. Same thing with Look Closer. As I build the character's background and how they came to be the person they are, that starts building the plot for me too. My character's backgrounds always seem to become a part of the present day plot. So, like I said, I was a little stressed out after Look Closer, thinking, what am I going to do for an encore? And then I thought, don't think that way. You're never going to write the same book twice, and nobody wants you to write the same book twice, except your publisher. Your publisher does. Publisher wants Look Closer 2, Look Closer 3, Look Closer, But I'm not kidding. They want the series, they want the brand, but I don't want to do that. And I don't think you want to read that. I think you want something new and fresh every time, right? You want, I hope what you would want is what the writer feels passionate about. Because if I feel passionate about it, it's going to show in the pages. If I'm not passionate about it, if I'm just phoning it in, I think you're going to pick up on that too. I mean, we've all read books by very famous authors, very successful authors who write series. And once in a while you get a clunker and you feel like, yeah, I think they just kind of wrote this one to get the paycheck. I've thought that before, like, it was okay, but it wasn't great. I don't ever want anybody to say that. I don't ever want anyone to read one of my books and be like, yeah, he phoned it in. I mean, maybe you won't like it, maybe you will. I hope you like it, but you'll never be like, he just sort of went through the motions. I will never just go through the motions. That's a much longer answer than you asked.
That's a good answer.
Brynn knows me. She knows that I will just start talking. So,
Well, and by doing all of that, you wrote a very twisty book that is almost impossible to put down. If I wasn't able to read it in one sitting like I would have wanted to, but you can't stop thinking about it because there's just so much going on, and each chapter ends in a way where you just need to keep reading, and you can easily justify it with your book because the chapters are so short.
Yeah.
So it's easy to just be like, I'm going to read one more chapter. I wanted to ask, how has living in Chicago and working as a judge helped your crime writing career?
well, I mean, sometimes, when people say, hey, how do you come up with the idea for crime? I said, I live in Chicago. I just opened my eyes. So I'm on the Court of Appeals in Illinois for when Chris mentioned the first district, that's Cook County, and Cook County is mostly Chicago. So I get all the civil and criminal appeals out of Chicago. So I get all the crime out of Chicago. If you were convicted of a crime in Chicago, you appeal to my court. And I'm one of 24 judges. You'll get a panel of 3. So I get some really, really bad crime, some unspeakable stuff, and stuff that still haunts me sometimes when I read about it. I don't, so, I don't usually, I'll tell you what probably, about my job gives me the most ideas. This may surprise you. It's not the criminal cases. It's the divorce cases. Because people who are breaking up can do extremely nasty things to each other. And that will give me ideas. I've never directly stolen an idea. It's never quite like that, but you get inspired by ideas. The police procedure, I will certainly read a lot because there's a lot of police procedure in all these books, and, cell phones and all those things. I learned all that from being a judge. I didn't really have to research it because I get those cases and I read all these experts talk about how you track somebody through phones, or the intricacies of fingerprinting and all that, or DNA. So that helps. That gives me a little bit of an advantage. But I think living in a big city is always, useful if you want to write about crime. But I live in a suburb outside of a big city, and that's kind of cool too, because then you got the slightly cozier settings, but the people can be just as nasty, and that can be kind of interesting too, right?
Well, it's interesting to hear that and to think about the plot in the book because it's so intricate and there are a lot of moving parts that are happening. Did you have any goals that you were setting out to accomplish with this book? I know it's a standalone, so were you thinking like, I want to go in and do this, and this is how I want readers to take it?
So when I started writing my own books again, I stopped writing my own books. You probably know this. Probably not. Everybody does. I stopped writing my own books in about 2014 when I became a judge. And at that time, I was still writing with Patterson. I write with James Patterson. Have we covered that part? Yeah, I think Chris introduced it. So I was doing that, and I'd become a judge, and all my kids were under the age of 12, and so busy, right? So I got into a fight with my publisher about a book. They wanted me to do something. I said, no, I don't want to do it. I walked away from a 2-book contract. And I ended up walking away for about 6 years. Not intentionally, but I just didn't go back to that. I was kind of, don't call me, I'll call you. And they would check in once a year. And my literary agent would say, are you coming back? I said, maybe, but not right now. Because life was good. Things were going on fine. And then COVID hit, and my wife said, she'd been kind of not badgering me, but consistently saying to me, your favorite thing to do is to write your own books. So go, you got to go back to it. You know, don't just let that go forever, because sooner or later, you know, Penguin Random House is going to tell you that they've forgotten your name. And so I promise you, I am actually going to answer your question, by the way. This is what I do. But I thought of my answer, and I decided to go back like 5 steps and lead up to this. So I had 2 goals when I wrote my first book, Look Closer, which of course is more like my 21st book, but it felt like my first book because I was starting over. And that was, number 1, to write what I want to write, not what my publisher wants me to write. Because if I write what I want to write, like I said, I think that's going to come off on the page. And psychological thrillers is what I want to write. That's what I care about. There's not going to be a lot of exploding helicopters in my books, or a lot of gunfire, you know, shootout scenes. Like, I don't write that stuff. It doesn't interest me. I like that stuff. I'll watch it on TV, but I don't want to write it because it doesn't interest me. But the other big thing that I decided, maybe in part because it was COVID, was I wrote one word down on a Post-it, and that word was fun. And I stuck it up on my computer, and I looked at it every day before I started writing. I want readers to have fun. And, you know, when I wrote this book, it's really no different than Look Closer. I didn't realize what I was doing, that I didn't realize that I was doing this, but now I do. I like watching a 1-season series of episodes of a show like Netflix or Prime or whatever, right? All these thrillers or whatever. And if you've got 8 episodes, at the end of every episode is usually a cliffhanger or a big revelation, something that makes you, oh, I got to go to the next one. I want to binge it, right? And as much as I can with my schedule, I like to binge. I hate watching the shows where I got to wait a week for the next episode. That just kills me. I just did that with Presumed Innocent, and it was killing me.
Destiny on the way here.
It was killing me.
Watching that, and every episode ends. You just have to click next.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard to stop watching.
Right, but I started doing it before they put them all out, so I had to wait every Wednesday. But that's what that's kind of what I do with these books. Like, you know, there's not episodes in a book, but if there's 80 chapters, I'd say about once every 10 chapters, I want to do something that really makes you say, holy, you know what, you know, like, wow, I thought this and now it's that, or big revelation. And I literally write it that way. And when I'm outlining the book, as I'm going along, when I'm keeping track, it's really not outlining. When I'm keeping track as I'm going along, I always mark the chapters. Okay, here's a revelation. Okay, chapter 11, I did one, or a big twist, whatever. I'll, you know, highlight it and be like, okay, by about like 20, I want another one. Because I want you to be like, wow, this is really fun. Like, if I keep reading, this thing is just going to be really cool. And I just think of the reader the whole time. I've probably, because of Patterson, he probably instilled that in me, because he's really good about that. But that's what he does. He just wants, you know, we're not here to win awards. We're not here to have people say, oh, you're such a great writer. We're here to give you an entertaining story. And so I do that now. And it's one thing to have a big twist at the end, and there is one here, but what's every bit as much fun and every bit as important is to have along the way the ride be so much fun before you get to the end.
It just, yeah, it makes it so much more enjoyable as a reader. And I read heavily in the thriller genre, and I think psychological thrillers stand out as some of my favorites. So what do you think it is about psychological thrillers that you're drawn to that and want to write those books?
I think readers are drawn to it for the same reason that I'm drawn to write about it and read about it, because I read what I write. I think that we are all, I think there's no such thing as a normal person. I think we are all weird. And I think we all think about ourselves. We have some really weird shit about ourselves that we don't want anybody to know, maybe not even our spouse. And yet we are basically normal because we don't transgress the societal lines for us on the big things that count, like don't kill people, but some people do, and they're usually, unless there's some like, like the inner city stuff with crime and poverty, that's sort of different. But in like a suburban setting where you've got people who seem to have normal jobs and they have a nice family, and they go to little league baseball games and sit out and watch the fireworks on the 4th of July, all that stuff. You know, some people do get pushed. And so I like to explore what is it that makes you go beyond and cross that line. Because it's probably because I was such a rule follower myself growing up. I did everything my parents wanted me to do. I got straight A's in high school. I was on the varsity football team, and I went to college, law school, became a lawyer in a downtown law firm. Like, yeah, I just checked all the boxes. Like, you're supposed to do all those things. But I was always interested in the people who didn't, the people who broke the rules and got in trouble. Like, those people were far more interesting to me. And I thought, I'm just boring. So I get to sort of inhabit their lives you know, when I write these books and when we read about it. I think we're all kind of taking a walk on the wild side. And I particularly like the thrillers where it's just everyday people. And some writers do that. Harlan Coben likes to do that. And I like him. I like his books. You can have all kinds of thrillers, like a spy thriller. I mean, it's fine. It's just not what I'm going to do. Like, I want the normal people who get pushed. So,
Well, speaking of normal people, I wanted to talk about the main character in this book, Leo Balanoff. You mentioned that he's a pathological liar. I mean, I'm sure we come across people that are pathological liars, but it's not every day that you meet somebody that's diagnosed as a pathological liar and you know that. You mentioned you thought that would be an interesting character,
Yeah.
but have you met or come across any pathological liars in your career? What kind of gave you that idea to go that route with this character?
I met one who had been diagnosed in a case that I worked on. I tangentially worked on it. It was a big case in the Chicago area. It came out of it was, it doesn't really matter. Kind of a well-known suburban murder in the 80s. And the police outside of Chicago basically framed 3 people for it. And then we prosecuted the prosecutors for framing these people. But one of the people who had been framed was a pathological liar, which didn't help the case and didn't help him with the police when they went after him, because he lied all the time. You know what I learned, Brynn, as I researched this a little bit, was there is the science, the psychology and science around pathological liar, compulsive liars is really pretty murky. Like, I mean, they're just doing the best they can, like, they'll look on a CAT scan and say, you have cancer. I can see a tumor there. They can't do something and say you are a pathological liar. Like, because you did this test, you are now a pathological liar. I mean, I've known people who lie all the time. I knew a girl in high school. She was a nice girl. I know her sister now, and we're good friends. She was a really sweet girl. Just lied all the time, like everything out of her mouth. She lied about her home life. She lied about some boy liking her when everyone knew he didn't, and how he was calling her all the time, like that kind of stuff. Like, hasn't everybody met somebody like that? And right, and almost everybody's nodding. I mean,
I met someone in college like that too, and we both went to a school in Minnesota, and I don't know if she just forgot that somebody else was from her area, because she would tell people like, yeah, I can walk from my house in Milwaukee to Madison. Like, all these things that can easily be looked up, and you can definitely tell that's a lie. And they just kept
Yeah.
coming. It's little things that aren't necessary, but it just seems so easy for them to do.
yeah, and there's so many reasons why people lie. Like, lying is so interesting to me. Anything that is universal to all of us is interesting to me, and then I can put a twist on it. And lying is universal. We all lie, right? And we do it for different reasons, and some of them are good reasons. Arguably, some people would disagree that you should ever lie, but white lies, you lie to spare someone's feelings. But um I think it's really fascinating to see somebody who, for whatever reason, is unable or unwilling to deal with reality and has to change it. Like there's so many reasons why that could be. I feel like you could write like 50 books on that.
So the other thing about Leo is that he's a lawyer, and pretty early on in the book, you find out that he is kind of caught in this FBI investigation where they have evidence tying him to the crime. And him being a pathological liar and a lawyer, we know he's going to try to dig himself out of this hole. So,
Yep.
what was it like writing that, where he is a lawyer, he's also a liar, and you're going to take him on this kind of cat and mouse chase where the readers are reading this?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of hard actually, but I would just sit there and think about, okay, what would happen next and how is he going to plot his way out of it? And I knew a little bit of the ending. I didn't know all the ending when I started. I am not one of those people who knows everything, but I did know one of the major surprises at the end. I did know that. And I obviously can't say anything else because I don't want to spoil it, but that helped me with a lot of the book. Knowing that surprise, I could carry that with me throughout the book, but a lot of it was taking my hand off the wheel and just saying, what would happen next? Okay, let's do this. You know, I would love to say that I plot everything out first, because if you can do that, do it. You know, really. I mean, because then I could write a book every 8 months. I mean, if I had the book fully plotted out, Patterson does that. When I write a book with Patterson, he starts with an outline every single chapter. Here, Dave, this is what I want you to write. And we'll go over it, and then I'll write it a little bit at a time and hand it to him. And I'll change it a little bit. He gives me some rope, but he plots it from beginning to end and he preaches that. I cannot do that. I can't do that in my books. I wish I could. As I'm writing and as I'm getting more into the characters, ideas pop into my head and I'll be like, oh, that would be really cool. I'm going to do this instead. But if I come up with that idea on page 220, that means pages 1 through 220, 219 are probably going to have to be changed. So then that's inefficient. I could lose a month because of a cool idea I had. I'll lose that month and do it. I will absolutely do it. Drives my publisher nuts. They want me to write a book a year. I'm like, but I just signed a new contract with them, and I said, don't even pretend like I'm going to put out a book next year. Don't even tell the public it's coming out, because it's not. I mean, if I can get it done in time, I mean, I'm trying, but anyways.
Leo, something else that's interesting about him is he has a fascination with numbers.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
gave you that idea? Are you a big numbers guy?
Yeah.
What do numbers mean to him? Because they come up quite a bit in the book.
Yes. So there's more than one thing going on here. Yes, I am weird about numbers myself. I that's where I got the idea. I so I'll tell you this. This is kind of embarrassing, but when I was a little kid, somebody explained to me that you can tell if a number is divisible by 3 by adding up the digits. And if the sum of the digits are divisible by 3, then the whole number is. So 1,246 is 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 4 is 7 plus 6 is 13. That's not divisible by 3 because 13 is not divisible by 3. Okay. No big deal, right? They told me that in like 2nd grade. And from then on, when I see numbers, I will particularly do this on the highway. I will look at license plates and I will look at the numbers and I'll count them in my head and divide them and see if they're divisible by 3. I have no idea why I do that. My wife has tried to convince me that it's a sign of like some great mind. I'm like, I really don't think that that's true. I think it's more a neuroses, like I'm like Woody Allen or something. I have to like, so that kind of got me down that road. So that was one reason I did it, was I thought that would be a nice quirk. I like my characters to have a quirk. Number 2, I thought it would be fun. Because, what did I say before? I want every chapter to be fun. And some chapters are going to be slower than others in terms of the plot. Not every chapter can be 1,000 miles an hour, right? So it would be fun if I could entertain you a little bit in some of these slower moments and throw in some things like numbers. If you find that entertaining. I found it entertaining to write it. Maybe people get annoyed, but I tried not to overdo it. But, another reason, and this was a happy coincidence, but I was very happy that it was true. There is a reason why he does that, which I talk about in the book very briefly. I don't make it a big deal, but he finds comfort in numbers for reasons that have to do with his childhood. And so, it all kind of came together and worked pretty good. But yeah, when with Simon and Look Closer, I had him worry so much about the English language, right? He would wonder why two words that are spelled exactly the same are pronounced differently, and weird stuff like that. People seem to like that. I thought they would like this number stuff too. So
Yeah, as somebody that's not a numbers person, I thought it was interesting. And like you said, in moments, anytime there's an address or things like that, numbers come up and he kind of jumps on that. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to know that it's kind of a comfort for him. So you mentioned earlier that you have worked, well, in Chicago, being a judge. There are a lot of bad guys. And
Yeah.
there are also some really bad guys in this book.
Yeah.
Did you have to do any research about any of the things that were going on in the book for you're kind of just able to pull from?
Yeah, unfortunately, given my job, I know about all this really bad stuff that happens, and I will say some of the subject matter in this book is serious, but it's in the background. Like the really bad guy in this book, I'm not really giving anything away, is a human trafficker. Like there's nothing funny about human trafficking. There's nothing entertaining about it, frankly. I don't know how you could make that entertaining, but you don't see any of that. You just know he does that, and that's why the FBI wants him. So, and Leo again is a crusader. He's a crusading attorney. He goes after people like this, and so he's sort of forced into working against this man, but he also sort of wants to be doing it. No, I see a lot of. I mean, you get the crime out of Chicago, it's a bit shocking what you see. Now, I'm on the Court of Appeals, so I don't see these people. I don't try these cases. I don't see the trials. I don't see these people. I just get all the transcripts, you know. So it's a little sanitized because I'm just reading it all on my computer. Usually, it's electronically transmitted to my court. So it's not quite the same, but I see some really nasty stuff.
Have you always wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I was a writer before I was anything else. I just forgot about it for about 20 years. I mean, that's really what happened. When I was a kid, I wrote all the time for fun. I remember in my fourth and fifth grade, my school district had a young authors contest, and I entered it and I won. And I went to this convention and realized that there were a lot of other winners too. And in hindsight, of course, everybody who entered won, but I didn't know that at the time. Even seeing all these other people, I'm like, wow, we all won, huh? Who lost? Of course, nobody lost, but I didn't know that. And I wrote plays. I'd come to my teacher and after a while, they're like, "Did you write another play, Dave?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Can I put on?" She said, "Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it tomorrow at homeroom, okay?" I'm like, "Okay." And I'll get my friends and I'd make them practice with me at recess. I mean, it was kind of silly. But so I did all that, and you'd get writing assignments. You get creative writing assignments, right? Second grade, fourth grade, sixth grade, whatever. But you start getting up into like the high school level, and I'm older now. I'm pretty serious about sports. I played two sports, and I was really into sports. I was really into girls, and I was really into getting good grades. Like those were the only three things I cared about. And if you had given me a creative writing assignment, I would have done it, and I would have loved it. But they didn't. I was in English, English honors, whatever. We didn't have any creative. I don't. We don't didn't have one creative writing assignment in all of high school that I can think of. And then I went to college. Forget it. I wasn't taking that kind of. I knew I was going to law school, so I just got a business degree, and I didn't even kind of screwed around in college. And then law school, forget it. I was working part time. It was just there's no time to write. But then, like 2 years into being a lawyer, I was like on vacation. I was doing what we all do on vacation, right? You have a cocktail in your hand, your toes are in the sand, you're watching the sunset, you're thinking about your life. And I was like, why did I stop writing? Like, I love writing. I love that more than anything I ever did. And it was because nobody made me and I didn't make it a priority. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, you only live once. So I made a deal with myself that I would write a book. I wouldn't just, because I had some idea for a book in my mind. It'd been gnawing at me a little bit. I'm like, God dang it, what the hell am I waiting for? I mean, and no one's gonna do this for me. No one's gonna lay out the red carpet and say, here's this path to becoming a published author. I mean, I hadn't taken any writing classes. I just knew what was good writing. And I was not doing it myself at first, but I knew that and kept getting better. So the thing I'm proudest of is that I stuck with it that first time. It took me 3 years. I had a, you know, I had to bill, 80 hours a week at this downtown Chicago law firm. I was writing like an hour a night, every night. It was a discipline. I had to do it. And I just said, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to write this. It took me probably 3 years to write my first book. And then it took me about a year to get an agent. But, there were a gazillion excuses along the way to stop, right? There's so many reasons not to do it. Go out with my buddies, go, see my girlfriend at the time, whatever. And I made a commitment. That is what I'm proudest of. However well my books do, however much money I ever make or don't make, awards are all great. But what I am proudest of is I had a dream and I saw it through. I kind of wish I hadn't waited so long, really. I mean, I really just stopped doing it for a while. And so if there's any lesson from that to your children, to your grandchildren, or to you, doesn't have to be your kids or your grandkids, it could be you. If you want to do it, make time to do it and to learn it and to get better at it. Take a class if you want, or do what I did. I just wrote and said, no, this sucks. I got to make it better. It still sucks, but it's getting better. And then, okay, now it doesn't suck at all. It's actually pretty decent. Just keep doing it, build those muscles up. If your kids aren't getting creative writing, but you think they like it, then give them I have a 14-year-old who really likes creative writing and she's not getting it in school. So I say, okay, Julia, let's write a story together. You write the first chapter, I'll write the second chapter. Do whatever you have to do. Because unlike music, unlike sports, unlike a lot of arts, creative writing, they're not really teaching. So you're going to have to make sure you find your child or your grandchild an outlet.
You mentioned just take the time to do it. How do you find the time to write as a parent and a full-time judge?
I write when everybody else is asleep. I
Early mornings, late nights?
3:30 in the morning till 7 a.m. That's my writing time. That's the only time I write. Sometimes on the weekends, if we don't have a busy weekend. In the summer, I sometimes have more time on the weekends. I'll do that too. But that's my discipline, is 3:30 to 7 is when I write books. And then my family's waking up and then I have to go be a judge.
So we've talked a little bit about James Patterson and you writing books with him. You've written 11 standalones and
I think so.
almost that many books with him.
Yeah.
What is your writing process with him like? How has that worked so well that you've been able to keep working with a co-author?
Well, I felt sorry for him and I wanted to bring him along a little bit because, the kid was struggling so bad. I really, took him under my wing. No, so yeah, he's been, I owe him so much. I can't even describe in words how much I owe him. But, I met him because he read my first book, Line of Vision, when I was a nobody. And you send off the book to people to ask them, Lori Brand, who was here, just wrote or published her first book. This is your first published, right? Bodies to Die For. Great book, by the way. I loved it. No kidding. I thought it was an amazing debut. I can't believe that's her first published novel. But, I'm sure Lori did this too. You send it out to people and you try to get them to say something nice. Patterson flipped over my first book. He just loved it. To this day, if you asked him, he would remember it and he would tell you what I did right. And it would mostly be like a craft thing. Like he kept the suspense going, or he never let, the character did blah, blah, blah. He's got a mind like that. So he gave me a really nice blurb for my first book. And then, fast forward to like the year 2007, I got a new literary agent who used to run Warner Books. He was the publisher for Warner Books, which is the umbrella for, I don't know, 50 publishing imprints, including Little Brown, which is Patterson. So of course he made it his business to be good friends with Patterson, right? Because he was his golden goose. And they were having lunch, and my new agent had left and become a literary agent, and Jim Patterson was asking him about clients. He mentioned my name. He said, "Oh, I know Dave Ellis. He wrote Line of Vision, blah, 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 blah." Next thing you know, he's asking me, do you want to do a co-write with me? Because he had started doing that. So believe it or not, I was reluctant to say yes, which might sound completely idiotic. I think in hindsight, I was just afraid I would screw it up, you know? Like I think I was a little intimidated, like, oh, what am I going to do? So I sort of hemmed and hawed with my agent, and he's like, are you crazy? Are you actually considering saying no to this? And I said, okay. He said, call him. Just call him and talk to him. Tell him what you're concerned about. He's a cool guy. Don't worry. He's just a guy. And I called him, and he was super nice. And I said, Jim, I'm really flattered that you would consider me, but I don't know how to write a James Patterson book. And he said, I don't want you to write a James Patterson book. I want you to write a James Patterson, David Ellis book. I want you to bring I know your skill set. I've read your books. I like your skill set. I like my skill set. Let's put them together and do something cool. So the way it works usually is 99% of the time, Jim will outline a book from A to Z. He'll write every scene, and he'll have 2 or 3 sentences about what he wants that scene to be. Like, here we see our protagonist and someone's lurking around the corner and something happens, whatever. It'll just be that little description and maybe a little editorialization from him, like this scene should be really, really scary, or this scene should be heartfelt, or we might need some research on this. And then he'll show it to me and I'll say, okay. Or not. He'll say, what do you think? What should we change? But he'll have the entire book in his head from beginning to end with each scene planned out. And then I'll write it about maybe 5 or 6 scenes at a time, chapters, 5 or 6. He calls them scenes. It took me years to figure out why he was saying it that way. But he thinks visually, he thinks cinematically. And so I'll write like 5 or 6 chapters and send it to him, and he'll call me and tell me what I did right and what I did wrong. He's always very nice, never yelled at me. I think he's been pissed at me a couple times, but he'll tell me. He'll be nice, but he'll tell me. He'll say this went on too long. I always know something's coming when he says, "Well, this was really well written, Dave, but but this is too much on this topic, too much on that. This took too long. This is slowing down. Maybe condense these 2 chapters. This needs to pick up. I'm not feeling this person. Maybe try this instead." Stuff like that. And he reserves the right to rewrite it himself. He can always do that. He's the boss, although he does not act like the boss. He doesn't treat me like an employee. He treats me like a colleague. He's basically my editor, like I would have an editor at my, for my books, except he's the smartest editor in the world. This guy knows so much about what the audience wants. And I know most of his books, all of his books are, easy reading, right? It's pretty light stuff. It's breezy, it's fun, it's entertaining. He branches out, but your basic James Patterson book, the kind of stuff I would do with them, it's going to be breezy. We're not curing cancer. We're not pretending to. It's going to be a fun, fast read. And he knows you expect that from him, and he's always ready to deliver that. And everything he says to me is in service of, will the reader enjoy it or not? And if the reader won't like it, change it or take it out. And if something is going slow, speed it up, because there's no slow chapters. We don't slow down. People don't want you to slow down. They want you to keep going. And that's easy to say. It's pretty darn hard to do. To keep a book consistently having no slowdowns, that's pretty tough. But he demands it. And I've learned so much from him. I don't even know how to quantify it. Like, he teaches this master class, if you see that, like on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And I basically take a master class every time I talk to him.
Well, it is a testament to your writing skill that somebody like James Patterson continues to want to write books with you too. So you don't think so?
Oh, I don't think
this guy over here.
He doesn't need me. He doesn't need me. He'd be fine with it.
I just enjoy working with you, and you've built this writing relation. He's like, no, I'm not.
I think I frustrate him. I think I frustrate him. I take longer than most. Some of the people he writes with just write for him. That's all they do. Like, then you're gonna, if that's your only job, oh my God. I'd be writing a chapter or 2 every day. I'd be giving him pages every week. I give him pages like every month, and he's probably like, God, it took you that long to write 6 chapters, Dave. But he knows my life. He knows what I have going on. He just doesn't, he's so chill, Like, and he's got a bunch of other balls in the air. So if I'm going slower, other people aren't, and we'll get to it when we get to it. We'll get to mine. We've done some really good stuff together, I think. I think he thinks so. And I don't know. The guy's fearless. Like, we're writing a book together right now about Hitler. And it's a historical fiction. It's about something that really happened, but we're putting a fictional spin on it. A lot of people think that Hitler murdered his niece before he was the Fuhrer. Well, he was the Fuhrer within the Nazi party, but before he was held any position of power, when people probably had the chance to stop him if they had actually prosecuted him, we're pretty sure he murdered his niece. He was having an affair with his niece, and then he killed her. But it went unsolved because the police just buried the whole thing. So we've done a lot of research, and he built a whole book around that, and it's pretty cool. But like, I would be afraid to write something like that. I'd be like, I can't write that. He's like, why can't we? Of course we can. He's fearless. He writes about all kinds of stuff.
So that's what you're working on with him now. But is
Yeah.
there a James Patterson, David Ellis book coming out soon that readers can expect?
Yeah, September we have one called The Lies He Told Me. Apparently that's a theme in
We're
my
sticking
books.
to lies.
Apparently that was his title. It's actually a really good one. I think it's one of our best. I think it's really good. I drove him crazy during that book because he doesn't care if I depart from the outline if it's good. He doesn't care whose idea it was. He doesn't have any pride of authorship. You know, in fact, one time I lobbied him to change something, to completely change the second half of a book based on an idea I had. And he was reluctant, but he said, okay, well, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to pull that up, but why don't you start and we'll go down that road, kind of keep me on a leash. And he said, if it's not gonna work, back to the outline. But if you think that might be cool, it ended up being one of his favorite books we've ever done. It's called Invisible. He ranks it as one of the top 5 books he's ever done.
Does it have a red cover?
Yeah. And but he didn't care whose idea it was. He's like, if it's cool, let's do it, but if it's not, back to the outline. Yeah. Because his outlines he knows exactly what he's doing. You'll read these outlines, you'll think they look simple, like almost simplified, like, okay, but they're not. He's really good at creating. It's basically like he's writing the story of a movie, and he's like, I want this scene, then I want that scene, then I a little there, do this, and you might read it and be like, okay, but when it's all done, you're like, wow, he's a pretty smart guy. I don't know how he does it. I don't have that skill.
So before I open it up to questions from you all, I wanted to ask, could you tell us anything about your next book that readers can expect?
Yeah. So, when I wrote Look Closer, that was categorized by the people who like to categorize books as a domestic suspense. And I said, oh, okay, that's probably true. And then I came up with The Best Lies. And they said, what's it about? And I said, oh, it's about this pathological liar who gets caught in the middle of a, FBI operation. And they said, well, that doesn't sound domestic, Dave. And I said, I never said I would write domestic, guys. I never promised that. And what deal did I make with myself when I started writing my own books again? I'm going to write what I want to write. It will always be psychological suspense. I promise that. Okay, I'm not going to write romance. I mean, I'm going to write about people trying to outwit each other, messed up people doing messed up things to each other, usually. Having said that, I try to be a good soldier. So I thought, okay, let's think domestic suspense, because I actually do like domestic suspense. I mean, that is where the action is for me, like seemingly normal people, suburban, whatever, doing crazy things. And so I said to my wife, oh, I need an idea. She was cleaning the kitchen. We were both cleaning the kitchen, and she was putting stuff away. And I said, I need characters who would do really messed up things to each other. And I can't think of the dynamic. And she walked by me and she said, siblings. And I'm like, oh my God, my world opened up. So my next book, I think, is going to be entitled Play Nice. And it's about siblings, brother and sister who are like, 39, 40 years old now. some interesting things that occurred to them and that they did to each other as children. And, you know, there is a murder in the present day when they're, 40 years old, in their close-knit family. And that's about all I got right now, but it's feeling pretty cool
Awesome.
so far.
I'm excited to read that. Is it
Thanks.
set to come out 2025 or 2026? You
Well,
said kind of the,
I said just if you're gonna they just announced it in the publicity papers, Publishers Weekly and all that, and I said just don't say it's coming out summer 2025 because I just don't think that's going to happen. So, and in the contract, I made sure they wrote 2026 is when I have to have it out. These guys could publish the book so much faster if they really wanted to publish a book, they could publish it 30 days after you give it to them.
Mhm.
You could compress everything you need to compress. You all the proofreading and editing, all that stuff. The problem is I'm in Penguin Random House. They're gigantic, and I'm not their only person, and I'm not their most important person. So, if I had a really topical thing, if like something hugely topical just happened, and I was right there with a firsthand account, and I could write something, they'd publish that thing in 2 months because they would want it while it was hot. But they can do it, but they don't. So, and they fit me in where they fit me in. So I'm guessing it will be summer of 26.
it is interesting always to hear authors talk about that because you're here talking about this book with us, but sometimes authors have already turned in another book
Yeah.
and then you're working on your next book. So
100%.
it is crazy how they
Yeah.
go about that whole publishing process. Did any of you have questions for David before we wrap?
Feel free, or I'll ask me later I'll stick
Yeah.
around as long as you want me to.
And your cover is fantastic. Did you see it and like it, or were there other before this?
There were others before this. No, so that's funny. We were just talking about this before we started, Brynn and Chris and I. The first cover for this book was orange and yellow. And it showed the main male character, Leo, and the main female character, Andy is her name, almost nose to nose looking at each other, like profiles of them. And I freaking hated it. But as I was saying off camera here, you have to tread carefully with your publisher because they have a lot of control over the success of your book. It's not just write a good book and you'll be rewarded. I mean, that is the biggest thing, but they can publicize it this much or this much or this much, depending on what they think of you. And apparently the sales department liked that cover, and I just hated it. And I talked to my agent about it a little bit, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's different looking. I don't know, maybe. And kind of just parked it because that was way before the book was going to be done. And then she left the company, my editor. And my new editor came in, who was he wasn't new. He was new to me. He was their top editor at Penguin Random at Putnam, my imprint. And he said, well, we're not doing that cover. That cover sucks. And so they did this, and this is a cool cover. It looks so much like Look Closer that you almost mix them up, which is interesting. I don't know if I would have been that on the nose with the colors, but otherwise I think it's a really cool. I mean, otherwise I love it. I don't know if I would have done I love those colors actually. Those if but it's just so much like Look Closer. I don't know.
Do we have one more question? All right, we will wrap. Thank you again, David.
Thank you for coming, guys.
To everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. What a lovely conversation. What a lovely evening. It's been fabulous. Brynn, David, thank you both so much for being here. Thank you folks for being here. We wouldn't have a bookstore without you.